Good evening. My name is Peter Rios. I'm your secretary on the National Board of Directors for SHEP. Welcome to our monthly best practices webinar. We're actually kicking off this evening what we're calling our career readiness webinars. This is a 5-part series that will be leading up until the National Convention in Cleveland. It's intended to help you prepare for interviews and then all the way up into getting that dream job, that position, and then succeeding for the first 90 days on the job. So these webinars are intended to be useful for students as well as seasoned professionals as well. So I'd like to welcome our first set of panelists. The title of this particular webinar is Interview Tips to Land the Job. So we'll really be focusing this evening on how to get that first interview, how to prepare and excel in that first interview. So I'd like to welcome our panelists. First panelist is Gabriela Perez from BP. Gabby's been a part of the university recruitment team at BP since 2014, and she manages recruitment activities at several universities, including Texas A&M and Colorado School of Mines. She's also responsible for planning and managing BP's presence at the National SHEP Conference. She graduated from Texas State University with her bachelor's in communications in 2011. So welcome, Gabriela. If you could give a nice wave to all our Facebook Live audience.
Hi, everyone.
We also have Carrie. Carrie is joining us from Texas Instruments. She's been there since 2013 and leads the diversity and university recruiting programs for the organization. She forms partnerships and builds methodologies for identifying and hiring a diverse group of technical talent. Carrie graduated from University of Oklahoma with her bachelor's in journalism, specializing in public relations, and her career passion lies with building enduring relationships and providing outstanding service to her clients. Carrie Hunter, if you could give us a wave to our Facebook Live audience.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for joining. We also have Gustavo Del Campo joining us. Gustavo holds a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He's a native of Mexico City, has worked in Juarez and Tijuana as a design and stress engineer for 7 years. He joined UTC Aerospace Systems in Chula Vista in 2006 as a stress engineer. He's held several positions of increasing responsibility. And after moving back to Chula Vista, he was promoted to Director of Component Engineering and is in charge of, if I'm saying this right, I hope Gustavo Nacellas, thrust reversers and engine mounts. And he's a director in the quality organization in charge of material review board and airworthiness engineering. It's a mouthful. So wave to us, please, Gustavo, to the audience out there.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
Thanks for joining. So we're going to have Gabriela take us off and start the lead with our first question. But I really want to, this discussion is meant to be engaging and interactive. So we love to take Facebook comments, questions, reactions from our live audience. So please feel free to chime in at any point in time. And so we'll start with our first question, which is, what does an outstanding resume have and not have? So Gabriela, if you can take us away.
Yeah, sure. So it's easier to start with what a good resume has. So it's easier to kind of follow some of that format. So some things to think about when you are introducing yourself to companies at different career fairs or other events. Your resume is also a reflection of your personal brand. So being able to kind of capture what you want employers to know about you, what your experiences are, what your skills are that would be applicable to them. You want to be able to capture that into a resume. I think what a great resume is for especially an undergraduate student is 1 page. We do kind of see this go into more than 1 page. I would definitely encourage you guys to keep your resumes to 1 page and utilize career services on campus. They are there to help you, and they have templates available for you to use. And they're usually, really well done. So that's the first place that I would start. Also, remember that not, I guess, starting with kind of some of the sections of your resume. An objective statement is something that I think can be a very debatable topic on whether it's needed or not. And my opinion of an objective statement is it provides a little bit of clarity to the employer of what you're looking for. So if you are a mechanical engineering student and you are looking for a mechanical engineering internship and your resume reflects that, you might not need to have an objective statement. Sometimes it can be there to help you, but sometimes if you don't feel like it's adding anything, you can remove it. Where I do think an objective statement comes into play is if you're looking for opportunities that might not be exactly what your major is, or if you're into exploring other opportunities that a company might have. I think having some of that clarity in your objective statement and saying what you're interested in, what you're pursuing, will give the employer a better chance to understand why you're applying. Recruiters have they look at resumes for about 20 seconds in an application. We have a lot of resumes to go through, so we want to know why you're interested in the role if maybe your background is a bit different than what others are used to seeing. Have your graduation date on there. I usually see this, but sometimes I don't. It's really important for you to have your graduation date. And really, by the graduation date, at least from VP's perspective, it would be the date that you become hireable. So I know some students are kind of, well, I have, I'm a junior or I'm a sophomore, but I have junior credits. It would really be the day that you are looking for full-time work is your graduation date. So having that clear, having your GPA as well, having kind of a chronological order of the experiences that you've had. So relevant experience when you're in college, any internships that you've been a part of, any relevant courses that you're in or studying for gaining those technical skills for an internship that you're pursuing. And definitely include roles that you might not, if you're working at maybe a restaurant during school or have some other organizations that you're involved in, include those on your resume because that shows that you can balance work and school, but sell it in that way. Say, able to manage time, prioritize work during my, this semester working at this job and supporting a 15-hour school schedule. I think additionally, having kind of a nice clean font. I've seen some really great resumes with students that have been really creative, and I think it definitely depends on the company and the role that you're applying to. But I would say keeping it simple, keeping it kind of more on a standard resume format will be easier for the recruiter to read and kind of follow that chronological path of your experience and what you've done. If you have an opportunity to get involved on campus, take advantage of that because for the most part, or not for the most part, I'm sorry, but we know that you guys are smart. We know that you are working hard and you guys are taking a lot of similar courses. The way to make your resume stand out from the student in front of you or behind you is really in some of those other experiences that you're able to get while you're in school. So are you a part of any student organizations? Are you a part of your local SHIP chapter? Are you involved in any of the executive boards there? Or are you kind of pursuing any leadership roles and volunteer work, anything that you can include to kind of make yourself a desirable and holistic candidate. We know that you guys are working hard and smart, so you want to find those other ways to make yourself stand out above the rest of the crowd. I think it goes without saying as well to have your resume reviewed, make sure that you don't have any typos in there, make sure you've got a professional email and phone number. You don't need to include your address. That's up to you, but I think just the school that you're at is fine. And really just putting out there what you want employers to know about you and what it is that you're looking for. Do any of you guys want to add something to that?
So I want to thank you, Gabriella, for that was great information to start us off. Very comprehensive. We do have a question actually from Emily, and it kind of goes off what you were saying, Gabriella, about making sure you have relevant experiences in a chronological order. So we have Emily from here, and maybe I'll turn this over to either Carrie or Gustavo. So Emily's asking, should a headshot be included on a resume, and how should gaps in employment be dealt with?
I'm happy to take that.
Okay.
Definitely do not include a headshot in your resume. I know I've worked in other countries, and yes, that has been the custom in other countries, but in the US, no. We are not supposed to be seeing that because technically, somebody could just
I think we're losing the audio with Carrie.
Okay.
Let me try to reset. Maybe Gustavo, if you want to just continue the conversation.
Yeah, sure thing. I agree with Carrie. The headshot, I think it's better not to include it in there. As far as the gaps in employment, I think if you're attending something, an event like the SHEP conference, you get a chance to actually explain it. And usually it's a good thing for you to go quickly, just give a 1 minute quick story regarding your resume, and then if you address those things up front, because it's usually a perfectly good explanation for all of these things. So, and the person you're going to be talking to, they'll understand. And so I think just being direct and honest and just bringing it up front, it's always the best thing. When you submit them online, it's a bit trickier though, but I would just make it honest and transparent. And if someone's interested in your experience, you get a chance to have that conversation, and you can always explain it. And if you truly do have skills that are marketable and the company's interested in, they will not matter.
Okay, thank you so much. Did you have anything else, Gabriella, in terms of how to address gaps in employment?
Yeah, I would agree with Gustavo. It is harder to explain in a resume on the page. It depends on maybe what the gap is. I have seen some folks that have said, studied school at this time, but I think that it's really looking for. I don't think that you need to explain on the resume. I think it would be the way that you can explain that for a role that you're interested in is finding an email address, a person, even if it's a generic email box, applying to the role. And then if it's something on LinkedIn, a lot of the times the person it'll say, reach out to the poster of this role. You can reach out to them and say, hi, Gabby, I applied to this role. I'm really interested in it. This is my resume. Please let me know if you have any questions. Happy to walk you through that or talk to you about it. But kind of opening that opportunity for somebody to ask you some of those questions or to follow up is really what's going to give you the opportunity to explain some of those gaps over writing it in the resume, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to transition to the next question, which we're going to have Carrie lead us off. I think Carrie's still trying to join us. There's been a missing connection. So we may just jump around a little bit and transition to our next question of how do you leave a lasting impression? And Gustavo, you're the lead on this question. So do you want to take us away with how do you leave a lasting impression? Especially at the national conference when you have thousands and thousands of students, waiting in line. How do you really leave an impression, kind of right there at that first interaction, and perhaps even in the interview as well?
Sure. I had the privilege to participate in 5 national conferences now. So I've probably spoken to over 1,000 students. And yes, there's some that they did a few things that I can still remember that I talked to them. And I think it changes from person to person. In my case, is how the first thing is how can you stand out? Now I think that can be accomplished in different ways. The what I get the most, so I'll start at first with what not to do, is coming in and saying that I'm open to do anything. That I get that a lot is I'm open to do anything. So what I tell them though is that usually in large companies like UTC, we have many different roles available. So for me, it's better to understand what are you interested in, what's your passion. That's the first thing, right? So if I'll give an example. I had a person tell me I'm an aerospace major. Okay, what are you interested in? And he told me I want to be a design engineer. Okay, why? So I really like designing things on the computer. I enjoy being in the computer. I enjoy innovating, having new ideas. Then I love building things. And I said, okay, that's good. Now let me look at your resume. Now, what have you done besides your regular coursework that has enabled you to get there? And this person said, okay, so I took optional classes in computer assisted drawing or design. I also was in a couple of SAE projects. So I've designed and built airplanes or cars and many things like that. So in my mind, this student in particular, he had a very cohesive story that he knew what he wanted, and his resume told the story that he was saying to me, and that for me was someone who stood out. And in this case in particular, is that most of the students, or not, I would say 90% of the students, do not know what they want. They're just open to anything. Now, the other thing is that, at least in my case, is something that doesn't quite make sense is when someone comes in and they start telling you that they have all this experience about this, I'm good at this, I'm good at that. Some people take it the wrong way. Some people understand, but what I tell them is really when you're in school, you're learning how to learn. You're learning how to learn. When we hire someone, we will do the training. We just want to make sure that you know what you like and that you're going to be learning fast. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you make new mistakes every time. So sometimes a little, maybe being a little bit humble, saying what your passions and what your interests are, and then backing that up with a backstory of what you've done during your years in school. For example, being part of SHEP. So I want to be eventually in management. So I'll be moving up the ranks in my SHEP organization. I've organized all the logistics for my chapter to attend the conference. That's a big thing. Or doing similar things at your university. So at least from my point of view, what really sets a difference is against someone that has a good story that makes sense and that we understand where that person would fit in the larger organization.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gustavo. Basically, do your research. Really try to figure out what your role could be in the companies that you're looking at. Gabriella, did you want to add on?
I completely agree with what he said. It's really knowing what you want, and it's okay if you don't know what you want, but recruiters definitely don't know what you want. So it's hard for us to predict that for you, and it's harder for us to lead a conversation that way. And really, it's about kind of having some of that good conversation and a connection with a recruiter and being able to explain why you're interested in the company and why you're interested in a role. That has been definitely the students that I've remembered the most, and the ones that I've thought, man, like they really want to work for BP. I hope that they apply. Um, so those students stick in your mind a little bit more. I think really, I completely agree. It's all about preparation and having some idea of what you could do with that company. It's great to have questions. Nobody's going to know that for sure, but having some, just don't go to a company and say, "Oh, what do you do? What are you hiring
Mhm.
for?" Like, what do you like? What do you do? What majors do you? Just having kind of no idea is not a great look.
Right. So what about, so we've kind of focused more on that um, the student arena, but what about, professionals with experience? Do you specifically look for other elements from professionals that have experience in terms of leaving an impression? I mean, I'm sure you probably expect them to have a better grasp of, their skill set and what they can offer the company. What is the expectation when you have an experienced professional approach you?
Okay. Let me take a stab at it first. Knowing what you want also is important, but just it's a different type of thing on knowing what you want. So in the area that I'm in, it's not necessarily aerospace, it's engineering and quality. It's mainly, do you want to be a highly specialized individual contributor, like your masters, your PhDs, right? Or do you want to be a manager? And both are fine. It just depends on what you want, because what we want to understand is how can we help you grow your career. So understanding that helps out a lot. Then the other thing is that as I'm reading through a resume or when I'm having the phone screening, I want to understand what the person is, what their go-to skill is. So this is a go-to person as a problem solver, and he is an expert, let's say, in statistical process control. That's his go-to or her go-to skill set. And most persons have two or three. Even when you're young, I mean, when you have 2 3 years of experience, in a couple of years, it's impressive how much knowledge you can accumulate. Again, if you're focused and you start mapping out a career plan, which is very helpful if you have a mentor. So you can start building on that. So when you have an interview, it's easy because you basically tell them what your plan has been. And eventually you'll find someone who's a good match and is willing to buy into you and into your career and your development.
Great. Any comments, feedback from the audience, our Facebook audience? We had a few questions. We have a couple thumbs up, a couple hand waves. I don't know. I'm not sure if the panelists can see all the reactions, but I think this is useful information for everyone watching live. I'll transition to our next question in terms of enthusiasm and attitude. So, I'm sure when students or professionals approach you looking for a particular position, people tend to hear you want to sound enthusiastic, right? You want to have a positive, optimistic attitude about the position. But is there a particular way or gestures that you look for to look for signs of enthusiasm and attitude? How can someone from an interviewee perspective present themselves in terms of enthusiasm and attitude?
So I would say in an interview environment, or even in another environment, but enthusiasm and attitude is really important. Say you're waiting in line to speak to an employer. I know that those lines get really long, so but there are kind of always people watching, just kind of maintaining some sort of a positive-ish attitude, or just looking like it's not the just worst line that you've ever been in. Sometimes we pay attention to that, but aside from that, I would say maybe in an interview space or when you're on site for a company, you show enthusiasm by being curious and asking questions and really wanting to understand, how you could be a part of that company, how you could make a difference, what kind of impact could you have coming into the company, asking others why they have been with their company and what still interests them about their company, and kind of having some feedback about that and what's important to you and kind of the employer that you're looking for. Having smiling goes a long way. Appearing Also appearing interested. So when you're on site for maybe a company interview, don't discount that others can be watching at all times, aside from just your interviewers, whoever is greeting you in the lobby, to escorting you upstairs, to just any other, you have no idea who's part of a hiring process or who's able to give feedback. So just kind of maintaining that positivity, asking people questions about themselves, maybe, how long have they worked for this company? What's the culture like? It's really being enthusiastic about the possibility of working for that company and showing that through curiosity and thoughtful questions. Is my best advice for kind of having that translate in an interview. Gustavo,
Okay,
do you have
great.
anything to add to that?
I really agree with what you're saying, Gabriela. I do believe that the attitude is everything, and you can always feel
Yeah.
the vibe, right? And there is the bad vibe, which is people appearing cocky, almost like hard to get. That doesn't work. And I've seen that happen a couple of times. It's like, yeah, there's no. But a very interesting point that you made. I was just thinking about my experience in the conferences, asking me questions regarding what do I do, what do you like. That actually makes a very lasting impression. That's a good thing, right? And it's actually getting FaceTime and trying to get. I saw one of the questions was how long is a good time? A couple of minutes, but really engaged with the recruiter goes a long way. And something that I've been taught in some of the training classes that I've been at is that in many cases the best way to engage someone is to get them to talk to you instead of the other way around. And sometimes you can lead the conversation by asking different questions, right? Like, for example, what do you do in the company? And it's, oh, I'm in engineering. Oh, you know what? I've always been interested in design engineering. What do design engineers do in your company? Or project engineers do in your company? And then once you get the other person talking, that starts to create a flow and you start bonding. I think that's very helpful. I don't know if you had experience on that or with that, Gabriela.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's all. Energy is contagious. So if you have a positive one and kind of create that bubble around you and go into an experience that way, you're going to leave the recruiter feeling that way as well.
Those are all great points, and I think it also brings a thought I have is just the power of connection, right? Sometimes you never know what you may have on your resume that may help you connect with an interviewer. I know I've had study abroad trips, and maybe a person also had a study abroad there or a memorable vacation. I've had skiing, even though I've just gone a few times, and I really enjoy it. And my interviewer loves skiing, and the conversation, started drifting towards skiing, and they lit up. And so, just trying to also understand, it's important to express, what skills you have and how you can have a niche in the company and how you see your role, but also just making sure you connect with your interviewer, I think is really important. So being able to speak to all the different elements in your resume. So that brings us to our next question. And I think you already addressed this, Gustavo. It looks like Hanny had asked how long is a good time for talking to a recruiter at a career fair. But this, I'll project this question because I think it's interesting and it's probably something that you see a lot at the career fair. And you mentioned a couple of minutes, Gustavo. So I know there's students that can take up quite a bit of time with the recruiter. And Gabriela, you've probably noticed this as well. How do you handle those type of interactions? Does that help a student's case if they're there for, 3 minutes and, they're succinct and to the point versus, 7, 8 minutes and you have to kind of politely try to transition to the next student? What is a good time for interaction and delivery?
Not easy. What I would say though is that you have a couple of days to go over the whole floor of the conference, right? So it's almost like speed dating, I guess. So you need to you very quickly get if it's a match or not, right? So if I was the interviewee, I would look at the body language of the person I'm talking to, right? Look at how the arms are, how they're standing, if they're looking at you, if they're looking around, and if you feel that you're losing that connection, it's okay to say thank you. Can I leave you with my resume? Can I follow up? Another good thing is can I connect with you in LinkedIn? People, some people, and maybe this is going away from the question a little bit, ask me for my card. In our company, we don't usually give out business cards, but if I connect with someone, I tell them write down my name and send me a connection request in LinkedIn, and then we can follow up that way. So some ways, but again, it's just look at that body language, and if the person is inviting and they want to keep talking to you, just keep talking to them, right? Just let it flow, let it flow. But you need to be watching for those signs. What What do you think, Gabriela?
Yeah, I would agree. Body language will tell you a lot, especially if they're looking up at the line or kind of around the recruiter. I think being able to have your elevator speech prepared, know what you want the recruiter to know about you, have a point of connection, and then have a way that you can follow up. And I think that those are kind of some key points to try and hit with recruiters. Have a question that you know that you want to ask them, and then leave them with the lasting impression of, oh, that was a great conversation, instead of, man, that guy talked for a long time. It's you want to be aware of the recruiter's body language, as well as have, some self-awareness of the students that are there as well. So being able to kind of be succinct, to the point, create that connection, and then find the right time to exit. I maybe like that 4-minute mark. If there was a time on it, it's kind of hard to gauge, but lingering for a long time is also a way to kind of, the recruiter will want to move on from conversation, and just don't make it difficult.
So quick follow-up question to that is from Bolivar, is when is a good time to hand out a resume, before the elevator speech or after? I feel like if it's firsthand before anything, you may lose the eye contact to connect. Any advice?
I completely agree with that. That's a good question. I think it's good to walk up with your resume, but a lot of times I do get students that walk up and just hand it right over, and then you have to kind of look at the resume and try. I would say introduce yourself, explain your major, what you're studying, ask the recruiter a question, and then say, I have my resume, would you like to look at it? But maybe have a point on your resume that, oh, I had this internship last summer, I had this experience that I wanted to talk to you about. Is there anything, what are the internship opportunities like at your company? And kind of have a transition, so it's not just about your resume, but I would say introduce yourself first, and then kind of open the opportunity for them to take that and think of something that you would want to talk about that's on there.
Great. So we had another quick question from Delia of whether to bring resume and personal cards. I don't think there's any disadvantage to bringing, both a business card and your resume. I do want to turn it over to Carrie to provide us some tools and resources to prepare for the interview. I think it might have just gotten, the connectivity might have just gotten stuck again, but I'm hoping it will come back. Let's see here, Carrie, if we can turn it over to you. Carrie, the screen may be stuck, but your audio may still work well. Are you still with us? Audio-wise? Okay, so what we'll do is maybe we'll transition. Maybe if, Gustavo, you can take the lead on this one.
Mm-hmm.
What are some tools and resources to, prepare for the interview? And just so everyone's aware, in one of the next webinars, we are going to be going through the different types of interviews. There's case study, there's behavioral interviews, there's all types of different interviews. So we'll be talking about those different types as well. So Gustavo, why don't you start us off, and then if Carrie comes back in and joins, we'll go ahead and include her as well.
Okay. I think preparation can go a long way. So usually you can find the map of the conference floor, so you know which companies are going to be there. So doing a short list of who do you want to talk to on the first day. First day is good because that's when we fill up the interview spaces. So you should go to the company that you really, really want to get a shot at interviewing. You need to go to that one first, right? And then once you go there, again, like Gabriela was saying, it's very important to understand what the company does. Don't walk up to us and ask us, what do you guys do? I just want a job or an internship, but I don't know what you guys do. It's a cool company. So if you're interested in a location, the division, something that can connect with the recruiter and start the conversation is always very useful. Now, if you have done something or a project that you want to use as a part of your sales pitch, I remember having one student had a printed out book of his engineering projects. So he had photographs of the analysis that he did. It was only like 5-6 photos though, but it went a long way. I still remember that was for like about 4 years ago. So those types of things though, again, you're prepping up for how you're going to sell yourself and how can you set yourself apart. That goes a long way. And then on the second day, usually what I've seen done with success though is that if you can't quite connect with someone because they were busy, you can always go back. Usually the second day is a lot calmer, especially in the morning. People start coming in around lunchtime. So if you want to talk to someone for a longer amount of time, go on the second day in the morning. They'll usually be able to talk to you maybe up to 10 minutes because it's usually fairly slow. And we're actually looking for someone to talk to. At least I am. So again, so if you plan everything, you try and schedule it, it does go a long way and it can result in you landing the interview with a company that you really like to get with. I don't know what's your experience on this, Gabriela?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice for the conference. Definitely that first day is when go to the companies that you're really interested in pursuing for an internship. For interview preparation, whether it be at the conference or elsewhere, know your resume, know the kinds of examples that you would want to think about. So you can Google behavioral based interview questions. A lot of companies use them. There's a ton of examples out there of, tell me about a time that you had to, you were working with a team and had to resolve a conflict, or anything that's like that out there. Think through examples that you've had in your academic career or in an internship or some other space that you can provide different answers to different experiences. Definitely, if you're not familiar with the STAR method, get familiar with the STAR method. It's situation, task, action, and result. So giving your answers in a way that really defines the situation or task that you were trying to accomplish. What were the actions that you took? And try to, steer away from the we's and focus on what you contributed. An interview is a time to sell yourself. So really be comfortable with, selling the work that you've done, and then explaining the results and what was the result and reflections looking back on that. Were there any lessons learned, or, looking back, I would have done this differently, but I've learned, from that experience to maybe hold a focus group ahead of something to get more opinions from people. Really, people want to see how you solve a problem, how you can work with other people, and the steps that you take to solve a problem. It's really like, because that's what you're going to be doing in your job. And they want to see how you are able to think through that and communicate it to an interviewer. So thinking through examples that you can bring to an interview will really help you.
Those are all great points, and I think what I found useful, and even for, I know some consulting firms do this, but I'm sure other companies, some hold mock interviews. You can get mock interviews, through your career office, maybe through a mentor, a professional mentor. But I completely agree with what you're saying, Gabriella, with making sure you have, I like to call them like your mini short stories with the STAR method ready, right? Think of situations or times that you've been on a project that you failed or that you've succeeded, or challenges that you've had, and be ready to use those short stories that you have to really show that you're action and results oriented, and you need to think about that ahead of time and make sure that you're succinct and to the point, and when possible be quantitative to demonstrate impact.
Right.
So those are all really great points. Any other tools or resources to prepare for interviews?
So you brought up a really good point regarding the mock interviews. So I'm based out of San Diego, so we do a lot of work with the San Diego State SHEP chapter. Every semester, especially before the conference, we hold a mock interview evening. So we gather experienced person, anywhere from directors, managers, individual contributors. We go to San Diego State, and we hold mock interviews with all the SHEP members that are willing to improve their interviewing skills. And we give them basically, we coach them, we do the interview, and then we have some coaching time. We go over some of the things that they did well, what should you improve, and we give them tips on how they can have a lasting impression. And I like to think that has helped them during the conferences. So if you're in your SHEP chapter, usually companies, even if they don't have funding to sponsor you, you will find no lack of experienced personnel willing to help you with that. In my experience, even when we send the emails out, we have a Hispanic professionals group within our office. I usually get 10 to 20 persons that volunteer to go and spend a couple hours helping out all the students that are going to interview.
Great. Wonderful. We have a question here from Monique Seymour. It's, what is your opinion on connecting with recruiters or hiring managers on LinkedIn? Which, does bring up another point, something to think about for both of you is, going to the career fair is one opportunity to get an interview, but there's a lot of opportunities beforehand. I know some companies send out, emails with their positions, or companies host workshops where you can meet the recruiters after the workshops. And there's the hospitality suites.
Mm-hmm.
You can also try to get interviews. Sometimes, by the time you get to the career fair, a lot of those interview slots are taken up. So maybe address this first question is, what is your opinion on connecting with recruiters or hiring managers on LinkedIn? But then we could also segue into what are opportunities to try to get that interview before the career fair, or some strategies.
So I think connecting with recruiters, that's what we do. So I think it's definitely okay to ask to connect with a recruiter, especially more and more now. I think everyone should be pretty comfortable with that. It's a very common way for folks to connect with each other, and I think is totally, absolutely fine and probably encouraged. I'm not as sure about the hiring manager, but I don't know. I would only connect with the hiring manager after you've met them. I think that it would be okay, but I would do that probably. Actually, but you could reach out to someone and say that you're interested in the role. I'm not as sure with the hiring manager. I think that's kind of 50-50. Might just depend on who the hiring manager is and if they are looking at their LinkedIn and it's something that they're expecting to hear from people. Recruiters are. We expect to hear from students on LinkedIn or professionals. I think it might just depend on the hiring manager, but I don't think it would hurt you. If you reached out to someone and said that you were interested in a role and were interested in learning more about it. Maybe if you reach out to a hiring manager, not making them feel pressure that they, would need to offer you an interview, but having some kind of, incentive of wanting to know more about the company, wanting to know more about the role, and have a kind of a less pressure on them to feel like they would need to interview you or something after that. But I don't know, Gustavo, what do you think?
So on the LinkedIn, I'd say yes, but ask them. I'd say that.
Yes.
So you talk to them, and I think it's instead of asking for their business card, ask them, is it okay if I send you a connection request in LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get, if they're okay, then it's a good thing. It's the way we work now, especially when you're building up a team. We work with our recruitment teams, and they're having us hiring managers more and more go on LinkedIn because it's the way people work now. So it's certainly something that is advisable. But again, I would say first talk to the person, because sometimes they get so many connection requests that they just reject them all. But then it'll be a good thing, because after you talk to them, then you look at their picture and then, oh, I remember that person. It's like, yeah, sure. I'll accept the connection.
Great.
Yeah,
So just
sure.
a few comments from our Facebook Live audience. I'm trying to squeeze everyone in here. Ever Hernandez made a comment here. I think this is in reference to standing out. He said he had a student that brought printouts of project summaries, and that was very useful in understanding his story. So kind of having that project portfolio, some tangible items. I've done that as well. I've had, publications, scientific publications or publications in engineering journals, just to show, certain project activities, things I've designed or data that I've helped generated. That's definitely helpful. So thank you for that comment, Ever. Someone asked regarding list of companies. I believe that is on the website, and Ever provided that as well. There was a comment here from someone regarding, as a woman, can you impress a recruiter where the job environment is more dominated by men, for instance, the oil industry? So I don't know, Gabrielle, if you want to try to address that question, or, but I'll post it up here. So maybe just how can you leave a lasting impression, and maybe this could apply to, a male-dominated field, which is the case in many fields of engineering. Or maybe how do you stand out even in the instance that you're making a career change in a different industry? I think that could be applicable to both.
Mm-hmm. So I think standing out, for one, I would be yourself in an interview. You would want to work for a company where you can bring your whole self to work and be who you are. So if you feel like you have to be more masculine in order to kind of be noticed, maybe that's not the place for you. But I think it's just about showing your interest in the company, showing kind of more of those standard ways of kind of standing out to somebody. But if there is, ask questions, about what the culture is like. What is it like for, what do teams look like? What would my team look like in a role like this? What kinds of so I've heard from other people actually at BP that have spoken to kind of women's groups, and they've said if you want to know what a company, how they respond or feel about kind of women in the workforce or other cultures, like ask them about their maternity policy. I don't know that I would do that exactly in an interview, but you could. I think it would be about just being yourself, showing that you're interested in the company, being technical, but providing those skills that they're looking for, but also following up via email. I think this can be such a hard question to answer because I'm not a man, so it's harder for me to think of. I notice the females in groups, so I automatically kind of have I notice. I think it's also very key for you to pay attention to who your interviewers are and what it looks like around that company. Do you see women there? Are there any women on an interview panel? What does it look like when you're walking around the company? Could you see yourself there? And kind of asking some questions around what that would look like, and determining if it's a right fit for you. And then if it is, and you're seeing, some diversity there, just asking, just being interested ask if there's a female in that interview panel, ask her what it's like to be a female in that organization. I think that is completely okay. And that's what I would do. Honestly, if you want to know how you could stand out a little bit more, is being curious about what it's like to be a female in a male dominated industry and how they've handled it and why they've stayed in that industry.
Great. Thank you so much. So we have a few additional questions. A lot of questions are coming in. And a few of them are centered around or focused on status, citizenship status. So we have one question here from, is there any advice for international students in terms of what they should hope to mention related to requiring sponsorships and a face-to-face meeting? So I guess maybe from a recruiting standpoint, how is that conversation or that message usually relayed if a student requires sponsorship and whether the company is willing to sponsor?
So let me try to answer this one, at least from the experience that I've had. What you'll find is that many companies, or actually no company, will ever ask you regarding your situation, regarding your immigration status, or whether or not you are requiring sponsorship. That's something that it will be very, very rare. Now, what I would do though, if you require that, being born and raised in Mexico and coming to the United States with a TM visa, I got sponsored. So what I would do is I would just hold your conversation with your recruiter as you would, and then after you've done your pitch, I would ask them openly, does your company offer any visa sponsorship for this position? And they usually will direct you to the recruitment or human resources specialist there, but that usually will let you know, because we will answer that question if you stand a chance in moving forward in the recruitment process. I don't know what your experience is and how you manage that within your company, Gabriela.
Yeah, so I would say career fairs do exactly that. And no recruiters if a recruiter starts talking to you and they ask if you require sponsorship, that is not good. But it's something that you can still develop that relationship. And some companies, like I would say for BP, for most of our roles and for all of our undergraduate roles, we don't sponsor. But we do for some master's and PhD roles, specifically in petroleum and geoscience roles. But that I would ask them if what roles do you offer sponsorship? And if so, what roles are available for that? And just having an open, kind of honest conversation about it. You don't want the company to feel like you're hiding it from them. But don't let it feel like it should stop you from developing, kind of a relationship or rapport with the recruiter at a career fair.
Great. So we have a few more questions. One individual, we have Milagros asking regarding professionals, people, individuals with experience. We mentioned this slightly earlier, but at the career fair, a lot of companies are looking for, individuals about to graduate or recent grads. If I'm a professional, with 2 to 5 years experience or maybe a little more experience, and you approach a company, but they're mostly interested in, the recent grads or students that are about to graduate, are there any strategies? How do you approach them with regarding to try to get that interview or, keep that connection until a position's available? I'm not sure if you guys have experienced this and can speak to this in the context of the Chef National Conference.
Mm-hmm. I could say from our experience, we're always looking for people with experience. Always, you will stand out, especially in the Chef Conference. That will be standout because most of the attendees are still in school or have less than 2 years of experience. So I would just approach the recruiter, tell them what you're looking for, and you'd be surprised at how many potential interviews you might have because it's so rare. And at the end of the day, so a normal company can have anywhere from 3 to 5% attrition, sometimes even higher. So usually when we go to the conferences, we might be looking for specific positions though, but we can always take resumes of people or individuals that we think might be a good fit when we go back home, especially if they have experience. I don't know, how do you handle that, Gabriela?
So I would say we do tend to have a focus on students in school or getting ready to graduate. In order to apply for our kind of entry level roles, you have to be within 3 years of your graduation date. However, we try to bring folks from our full-time recruitment team with us so that they can speak to opportunities that we might have for some experienced professionals. So you might encounter companies that have a similar approach, that might have some knowledge in some of their more experienced professional hiring on that side. What I would do is still create that connection with the recruiter, get to know the other recruiters that are there. For us, we have a different website for kind of the professional hiring, and you can set up a queue on a website within a company to alert you when, whatever boxes it is that you've clicked on to alert you when a role has been open. That is when those networking opportunities that you had at the conference will come in handy because you can follow up with them on LinkedIn or on email and say, follow up with them after the conference and just say, it was great meeting you. I'm interested in, pursuing these types of roles at BP or, whatever company. Please, keep me in mind if something opens up. And a recruiter might not, we have people emailing us, but if you kind of do some of the diligence to pursue some of those roles or look for them, and then follow up with those recruiters that you met, that is where I think that connection can take you far, or can it take you further than kind of blindly dropping a resume into an application. That having an advocate is really, it's a good thing.
So we have one last question here regarding an individual that has a master's degree and is having difficulty trying to obtain a position with that degree. Someone advised her to take it off her resume. What advice would you have for that? Maybe just a quick 15-second response, because I do want to run our last minute and I do want to give you a chance for final remarks.
Please, Gabriela.
So I I wouldn't take it off your resume. It's your master's degree. If there's, I can say for some employers, I think it can be an issue of if they can hire a bachelor's student for this certain amount of money, they don't want to pay a master's student for that. So if you're open to, that's just sometimes what I see is you might not get compensated for that master's degree if a bachelor's candidate can fill it as well. So being open to that and being, I have a master's degree, I wanted to specialize in this, but I maybe in some applications just apply as a bachelor's. So that you can get through the system, because sometimes it's just about that. If who knows what filters people have on. I'm not saying a lie, but just work with it how you can, and then when someone looks at your resume, they can see masters, but at least you've gotten through the application. But knowing that if you're applying for a role that a bachelor's candidate can get, you might not get compensated for the master's degree. So I think employers want to know that you are okay with that too.
Great. Great. So it looks like we're about a minute over time. But any closing remarks or final thoughts for our audience this evening with regards to interviews and getting your foot in the door for that interview and excelling?
I guess the only thing I would bring up, especially for the conference, is do your prep. And someone mentioned the previous night when we host those events in the suites. That's actually when we start booking the interviews. So it's going to be hard work. You need to give it 110% and do your homework.
Yeah, I would agree. Preparation, and also I can speak for VP. Our applications are open now. So getting that foot in the door ahead of time, if you're able to, seeing if folks, I don't know if you're able to see on the SHIP website if they're interviewing when they're there, but if they're not, but you know that they'll be there, just taking a look, kind of taking that extra step and seeing if that company's going to be at your campus and making that connection ahead of time so that you can see them again at the SHIP conference and say, hey, I remember you from, Texas A&M. It was great to see you at this event. I applied to that role. Great to see you at SHIP. Just the more that you can connect with a recruiter, the better. And a lot of the time at schools and at the SHIP conference, like Gustavo said, he was there for 5 years. It's going to be the same people frequently over years. So developing those relationships benefit.
Great. Well, I share the sentiment of Hanny here. Thank you for your time. Very valuable insight, very valuable information, I think, for both our student and professional members. I want to encourage everyone to please take our post survey, which I will post in a comment on our Facebook page under the video. Please, we'd love to get your feedback. And just as a reminder, this is part of a series of webinars, career readiness webinars to prepare you for the conference. And so I'd like to thank the panelists again for your time, for your insight, and please stay tuned for our next series. So thank you. Good night to the Chef Familia, and everyone take care. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you.